Welcome to my channel Official History of Coins. Before we dive in, take a second and just think about the last time you emptied your pocket change onto a counter. You know that feeling when you glance at some dark, grimy little nickel. First up, that looks like it's been run over by a truck, stepped on in a parking lot, and then left out in the rain for a decade? That's exactly the kind of coin I want to talk about today. It's dirty, it's scratched, it's worn down to almost nothing, and most people would toss it back into a cup holder without a second thought. But here's where things get interesting. That ugly, ignored, beat-up piece of metal might just be the reason you start checking every single nickel you get from now on. So let me paint a picture for you. You're sorting through an old jar of coins from a relative's basement, or maybe you get a buffalo nickel back as change from a coffee shop. Your first reaction is probably something like, wow, this thing is rough. The buffalo on the back is missing its hump, maybe even half its body. The Native American face on the front is so smooth you can barely make out an eye or a feather. It looks like nothing special, just another worn-out old coin that isn't worth the 5 cents it claims to be. But hold that thought, because underneath all that grime and those tiny scratches, there's a story and sometimes a surprising pile of cash that would make you feel awfully silly for ever ignoring it. This specific coin is the 1916 Buffalo nickel, also known as the Indian head nickel, and it has a background that makes it totally different from the modern nickels in your pocket today. Designed by a man named James Earl Fraser, it was meant to capture the spirit of the American West, with a proud Native American on one side and a massive American bison on the other. The design first appeared in 1913, and by 1916, the United States Mint was still working out the kinks. See, the date on these coins is raised on a little mound, and that mound wore down incredibly fast. Within just a few years of circulation, the date could completely disappear. So a coin from 1916 that still shows a clear, readable date is actually a tiny miracle of survival. And that's where the value begins to creep in. What makes the 1916 Buffalo nickel so different from other Buffalo nickels is the perfect storm of low mintage, early design flaws, and collector demand. In 1916, the Mint in Philadelphia produced just under 63 million of these, which sounds like a lot. But trust me, over 100 years of wear, melting, and loss have made the surviving examples far rarer than you'd think. Plus, there are no mint marks on the Philadelphia coins, but the Denver and San Francisco issues for 1916 are even harder to find. The real magic, though, is in the details you can check with your own two eyes and nothing more than a cheap magnifying glass. Look at the front, at the date. Can you see 1916 clearly, or is it worn smooth? Now flip the coin over to the Buffalo side, and look just below the word 5 cents. If there's a small D or S there, you've got something truly special. And here's the part that gets most people excited, because even a coin that looks like it spent 50 years in a gravel driveway can still be worth real money. For a 1916 Buffalo nickel that is heavily worn but still has a fully readable date, you could easily be looking at around $850. If the details are a little sharper, maybe the Buffalo still has some hair texture or the Indian's braid is visible, that same coin jumps to $1,300. Push it up a notch to a nice solid, very good condition with clear features and only moderate wear, and you're at $2,100. For one that spent most of its life tucked away in a drawer and still has luster and nearly full detail, think $3,400. And if, just if, you have a mint state example that somehow survived untouched for over a century, we're talking about a coin that can easily reach $4,700 or even more at auction. That's real value from something that looks, at first glance, like trash. Now I know what you might be thinking, but mine is really ugly. It's dark and scratched, and the Buffalo is just a lump. That's okay. Ugly coins can still be valuable coins, especially key dates like 1916. The scratches you see are often just honest, where from being passed from hand to hand for generations, and that doesn't automatically kill the value. What kills value is cleaning. So listen to me very carefully on this next point. Do not, under any circumstances, take a polishing cloth or baking soda or toothpaste or anything else to this coin. Do not scrub it. Do not dip it in anything. Do not try to make it shiny. Collectors want the original surface, even if it's dark or discolored. A clean coin loses most of its premium and becomes a fraction of what it could have been worth. Leave the grime alone. Leave the scratches alone. Just put it in a small envelope or a cardboard flip and keep it safe. You don't need to be an expert or own high-end grading equipment to start looking for these. Just get a decent light and a magnifying glass and check every buffalo nickel you come across, especially the ones that look too worn to matter. Flip them over, squint at the date, look for that mint mark below the words 5 cents on the reverse. And remember, the 1916 is just 1 year, but even other buffalo nickels with no visible date can sell for a few dollars to collectors who fill albums with them. The point is that crusty, scratched, easy-to-ignore coin in your change jar might not be just an old nickel. It might be a quiet little piece of history worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars to someone who knows what to look for. So before you toss it back into the drawer, take a second look. All right, that's the story of the 1916 Buffalo nickel, a coin that proves beauty and value don't always go hand in hand. Sometimes the roughest, dirtiest, most overlooked coins are the ones hiding the biggest surprises. So go check your pockets, your old piggy banks, and that dusty box in the garage. You never know what's sitting there, quietly waiting for someone to notice it. Thanks for hanging out and listening today, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy hunting. Next coin, look closely at this coin. What you see first is probably a flat, grayish disc with soft, rounded edges, the kind of thing that gets lost in the bottom of a junk drawer or tossed into a Coinstar eject tray. The date is barely visible. Maybe just a faint 1924 if you tilt it under a good light, and the buffalo on the back has lost its hump, its tail, and most of its face. The word Liberty on the front is almost worn smooth, and there are tiny nicks and scratches crisscrossing the surface like dry creek beds. Most people would take one look at this dull, damaged, worn-out nickel and conclude it's worth exactly 5 cents, or more likely, nothing at all. But that quick judgment, that assumption that ugly equals worthless, is exactly what makes the 1924 Buffalo nickel such a fascinating coin to study. Why do so many people misjudge this coin? It comes down to simple psychology and a lack of context. We're trained to associate value with shiny, pristine objects, especially coins. A bright new quarter feels valuable. A dark, scratched nickel feels like trash. But the Buffalo Nickel series, and the 1924 issue in particular, tells a different story. These coins were designed with raised details that wore down incredibly fast in daily circulation. A 1924 Buffalo Nickel that still has a clear date and visible features is actually a survivor, not a failure. The very where that makes it look like pocket change is the same where that makes well-preserved examples so rare. People misjudge it because they don't realize that 100 years of pocket friction, cash register drawers, and parking meters have eliminated most of these coins entirely. Let's step back for a moment and understand what this coin represents. The Buffalo Nickel, designed by James Earl Fraser, was introduced in 1913 as a bold break from the classical designs of the past. The obverse features a composite portrait of 3 Native American chiefs, while the reverse shows a black diamond, a real bison from the Central Park Zoo. By 1924, the design had been in production for over a decade, and the mint had made some adjustments to try to slow down wear, but the raised date on the obverse and the raised ground on the reverse still wore down quickly. The 1924 issue came from 3 mints: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with AD, and San Francisco with an S. The Philly version is the most common, but even it is becoming scarce in higher grades. Collectors love this year because it falls right in the middle of the series, a classic date that every complete set needs. So how do you look at a 1924 Buffalo Nickel and figure out what it might be worth? First, check the date. If you can clearly read 1924 without guessing, you're already ahead of most surviving examples. Second, look at the buffalo's horn. If the horn tip is still visible as a distinct point, that's a good sign. Third, examine the hair on the Native American's head. Is the braid line still defined, or is it a smooth blur? Fourth, flip it over and look just below the words 5 cents. If you see a D or an S, you have a much rarer coin than the Philadelphia version. And finally, look for any mint luster, the original shiny surface that survives underneath the patina. Even a small patch of luster can signal a coin that has never been heavily cleaned or damaged. Now let's talk about realistic prices, because this is where the 1924 Buffalo nickel surprises people. For a heavily worn but fully readable example with a clear date and visible buffalo details, you can expect to see prices around $920. If the coin shows a bit more definition, say the buffalo's horn is sharp and the Indian's hair braid is mostly intact, that same coin jumps to roughly $1,650. Move up to a solid, very fine condition with only moderate wear across the highest points, and you're looking at $2,750. For an extremely fine example that still has most of its original detail and only light wear, think $3,850. And if you happen to have an uncirculated or near uncirculated 1924 Buffalo nickel with full luster and no major marks, that coin can easily reach $4,900 or more at auction, especially if it's the Denver or San Francisco issue. Those numbers are not fantasy. They are real market values from recent sales. Here's the crucial thing to understand. Condition matters tremendously, but even a well-circulated 1924 Buffalo nickel can carry strong value. You don't need a perfect gem to have a coin worth hundreds of dollars. A solid, honest, everyday pocket-worn example that still shows a readable date and a recognizable buffalo is absolutely desirable to collectors who build albums and typesets. In fact, many collectors specifically seek out attractive, circulated examples because they look like real history, not like sterile factory products. The key is originality. A coin with even wear, natural dark toning, and no major damage is far more valuable than a coin that has been scrubbed shiny or dipped in acid to look fresh. That brings me to the warning you absolutely need to hear. Do not clean this coin. I don't care how dirty or dark it looks. I don't care if you can't read the date through the grime. Do not scrub it with anything, not a cloth, not baking soda paste, not a jewelry cleaner, not even dish soap. Cleaning leaves microscopic scratches that permanently alter the surface, and collectors can spot a clean coin from across a room. A clean 1924 Buffalo nickel loses 50 to 80% of its value instantly. What you should do instead is simply rinse it gently in distilled water if it's really dirty, pat it dry with a soft towel, and then leave it alone. Better yet, just put it in a non-PVC plastic flip or a cardboard holder and let it stay as it is. The wear and patina are part of its story. So the next time you see a dull, worn, scratched Buffalo nickel, especially one with a date that might say 1924, don't just assume it's worthless. Take a few seconds to look closer. See if you can read the date clearly. Check for a mint mark below the buffalo. Notice how much hair and horn detail remains. And remember that even an ugly, beat-up example can be worth real money to someone who understands what they're looking at. This coin has carried value for 100 years, and that value isn't going away. Thanks for watching, and next time you sort through old change, keep an eye out for the 1924. You might just be holding a small piece of history worth far more than a nickel.